Welcome to Short Movie Channel. The film begins with a true story about a man named Cameron and his wife, Janice. They enjoy playing strange games with people in remote places. While they're driving their car, it suddenly breaks down. Cameron gets out, opens the trunk, and asks his wife to help him. Janice is very worried and doesn't want to help, but Cameron convinces her. At that moment, they pull out a dead body from the trunk of the car. They begin driving through the woods, where Cameron buries the body. He tells Janice to focus and watch out for anyone who might see them or get close. When the sun rises, the signs of the burial are visible, and they return to their car. Janice is very upset and tells him that she never expected someone would die because of them, but Cameron convinces her that he had no choice, as the body was screaming loudly, and anyone could have heard it, and called the police, leading to their arrest. Then, they drive back to their house. On the morning of May 19, 1997, a girl named Colleen is standing on the side of the road, looking for someone to give her a ride. A few minutes later, Cameron and his wife are driving their car, and when they see Colleen on the road, they offer her a ride to her house. Colleen is very happy and agrees right away. She then tells Cameron and his wife that she's going to a friend's birthday party in California, and she doesn't pay for transportation, asking people to give her rides instead of paying for it. After that, they stop at a gas station to refuel. While Colleen goes to the bathroom, Cameron opens the trunk of the car, pulls out a wooden box, and places it on the back seat. When Colleen comes back, they continue driving, and Cameron suggests they visit the ice caves. They invite Colleen to join them, and although she's a bit worried, she agrees. Cameron starts driving through the woods, and suddenly, when they get out of the car and Colleen is walking ahead of them, Cameron quietly follows behind her so she doesn't notice. He has a knife with him and threatens her, saying he might kill her if she doesn't listen. Colleen gets very scared and agrees to do whatever Cameron says to avoid being hurt or killed. Cameron covers her eyes and clamps her mouth shut so she doesn't make a sound. He cuffs her hands, places her head in the wooden box, and locks it shut, waiting until nightfall to move again. Night comes and he moves to the house and Cameron takes Colleen to the basement. At his wife's request to come, Cameron tears Colleen's clothes in order to hit her on her body. Cameron continues to torture her and continues to hit her hard. He is very pleased with what he is doing. Then when he finishes beating and torturing Colleen, he puts her head back in the box. The next day, while his wife is having breakfast, Cameron leaves the house and goes and buys some groceries and food for Colleen. He returns at night and starts torturing her again. He goes to the basement and starts feeding Colleen. He also makes her take a bath in his palace. Before he tortures her, his wife is upstairs and hears what Cameron is doing to Colleen. At that moment, she feels guilty. After hours of torturing Cameron, Colleen talks to her husband, Janice, and asks what they will do to Colleen. This is because she is afraid that Colleen will reach the police and report them if they leave her. Cameron decides that they will keep Quinn like animals and always keep her in the basement. The next day, Cameron makes a wooden coffin to put Colleen in. She remembers the day she left her home and her father offered to give her transportation money, but she refused and regrets not taking the money and listening to him. When she was in the gas station bathrooms, she felt very worried about Cameron and his wife. She was about to run away from them, but she stayed with them. Then what happened. After that, she receives a call from Jack, Colleen's father, who learns that his daughter is missing. He and his wife go to the police station to report the disappearance of their daughter, who has not returned home for a while. He and his wife are very worried about their daughter Colleen. After 6 months, Janice goes to her husband's carpentry shop where he works. They also learn that she is pregnant, and that they might let Colleen go because her presence is no longer necessary. As for Cameron, he is not convinced by this talk, and he removes this idea from her head. A month later, the couple returns home together after Janice has had surgery on her leg joint. Cameron watches magazines and learns more about slavery contracts and that he can make anyone work for him with a very long contract, and that if the man who signed this contract escapes, he can be imprisoned or executed as well. He makes his wife write a fake slavery contract and goes to the basement. He talks to Colleen about her being his slave. He tells her that he works for a company that controls and supervises slavery contracts, and lies to her. He tells her that Janice was his slave and that he treated her in a very bad way before he bought her. Colleen is very terrified and wishes for this fake contract. He tells her that Cameron is now his slave legally and threatens that if she tries to escape from the company he works for, she will her family's story. And he scares her and tells her that the company broke Jance's leg when she tried to escape, and with time, Cameron marries Jance, and the next day he talks Cameron with Colleen and knows that this is the duty that must make her like a slave to him, and tells her that he will change her name, and indeed he calls her Kai and hangs around her neck a collar like a dog collar, and tells her that from now on she will call him my master and will suit T. 1. When someone calls her and tells her to pay attention, she must stand up and raise her hands up, and Colleen starts doing her duties in the house and cleans and does all the housework. And they study for a year. Cameron and Jance stay in their house at night, and they have their daughter who is still born, and they name her Amber, and Cameron makes Colleen come out of the coffin to see their daughter for a short time, and Colleen is very happy when she see her, and she is happy because you don't see anyone else since the day she was kidnapped, and then Cameron returns her to the coffin again. 2 years later, their daughter grows up, and Colin continues to serve them and do the housework throughout this period. One time, while preparing food for them, Colin drops the knife, and Cameron gets angry about it, hitting her. As for Janice, she couldn't bear what was happening and wanted to help Colin. She would ask him to stop what he was doing, but she was afraid of Cameron. The next day, Cameron talks to Colin and tells her a story about a slave who managed to escape from her master and went to the police, but the police were working for the company. They returned her to the company, where they cut off her tongue and limbs. Colin gets scared by this story and tries to accept her situation. She also forgets the idea of running away entirely and listens to what Cameron says, telling her not to talk to anyone or share anything with anyone if she goes anywhere with him. Janice becomes very jealous of how Cameron treats Colin and his strong interest in her. She treats her very badly, forcing her to do everything in the house, literally. She tells Colin that her role in life is to endure the suffering and pain she is going through. One day, Cameron takes Colin into the woods to gather wood because his wife is sick. While there, they meet 2 men, and Cameron tells Colin that they are company workers. Colin tells him not to say, "Sir," in front of them. Colin is happy to be out of the house and change the atmosphere. Then she asks Cameron when he will take her to her family. Cameron gets angry with her and says that the company doesn't trust anyone, but he promises to take her to her family later. They begin working, but suddenly Cameron falls to the ground, injured by the axe while chopping wood. This gives Colin the chance to run away and go to her family, but she is afraid and hesitates, deciding instead to help Cameron. That night, Cameron talks to his wife and finds out that she is very jealous of Colin because of how Cameron treats her. He suggests to Janice that they let Colin sleep with them in the same bed. But when Cameron tries to get close to Colin, Janice gets extremely angry and forces him to put her back in the coffin, forbidding him to touch her again. After 4 years of Cameron kidnapping Colin, Colin looks at herself in the mirror and notices that her appearance has completely changed. She looks exhausted and drained. One night she sees Amber, who has grown up, and asks Janice how long she has been living with them in the house, as she has lost track of time. One day, Cameron and his wife go on a trip to the lake, leaving Colin locked in the coffin by herself. Colin dreams of many nightmares and wonders what she did to deserve all this. She tells herself that she hasn't done anything wrong in her life. Suddenly, she hears a voice telling her that the pain and suffering she is enduring are a test from God. Colin begins to imagine herself drowning, and she is terrified of this thought. In her fear of dying and drowning, she kicks the coffin with her feet. When Cameron returns from the trip, he notices that the coffin is broken. He fears that Colin may have escaped and searches the entire house for her. He eventually finds her hiding in the bathroom, and she tells him that she was reading a book about the duties and obligations of slaves toward their masters. Cameron scolds her and puts her back in the coffin. At night, he told his wife that Colleen had to be taken out of the coffin, that it was enough, and that he was going to do what he wanted with her. He then showed her the clause from the book of slavery he had, saying that masters were free to have relationships with their slaves as they wished. Colleen started spending her time outside the coffin, living with them, and became very close to Amber. As for Janice, she felt guilty toward Colleen and began to treat her with great kindness. After 6 years of captivity, Colleen became a servant and slave to Cameron, doing all the household chores. She even lived a very normal life with them, playing with them and even going to church with Janice. Janice felt guilty for what she was doing to Colleen and started treating her well. After they returned from church, they played with Amber, and suddenly Cameron returned home from work, extremely angry that Colleen and Janice had become friends. He went with his wife to the bedroom and hit her very hard. After an hour, Cameron returned to Colleen and tried to calm her down. The next day, Cameron told Colleen that she could visit her family whenever she wanted. He lied to her, telling her he would try to convince his company to allow Colleen to visit her family as she had wanted. In fact, they allowed it, and Colleen was very happy and started thanking him. However, Cameron tried to test her to ensure she would follow his orders. He gave her a gun and ordered her to hold it and kill herself, claiming it was a loyalty test. Of course, Colleen listened to him, held the gun, put it in her mouth, and fired. But Cameron had removed the bullets from the gun to ensure she would obey him. After an hour, Cameron and Colleen went to her family's house. Cameron warned her not to tell them anything, as the company might kill them both if they found out. When they arrived at her family's house, they were overjoyed and couldn't believe that she had come to them after all these years. Cameron introduced himself as Mike, claiming to be Colleen's boyfriend. After that, he left Colleen with her family and went away. Colleen's sister, Bonnie, noticed that Colleen looked sick and tired and asked her why she had been missing all that time, but Colleen couldn't answer her. The next day, Cameron went back to Colleen's family's house, and the family asked how Colleen and Cameron had met and fallen in love. Cameron lied to them, saying they had met a few months ago, became friends, and then fell in love. He also told them he was planning to marry Colleen. Cameron and Colleen returned to their home in California, and that night Cameron told Colleen that he really loved her and wanted to marry her. Janice was with them and became very upset, and decided to go to her family's house. The next day, Janice started packing her things to leave Cameron in the house. Cameron was very angry and took all his frustration out on Colleen, torturing her and locking her in a cabin, which was extremely cold for her. Then Cameron drove off, and Janice soon felt guilty for leaving Colleen with that crazy man. She returned to the house and started helping Colleen escape. When Janice told Colleen she could return to her family, Colleen was afraid that by leaving, she would be betraying Cameron's trust. Janice then told her the story of the girl they had killed and buried her body in the forest without anyone knowing. Janice explained that the slavery contract wasn't real and that it was all just a lie Cameron had written. She told Colleen that if she stayed with him, the same thing would happen to her. Janice encouraged Colleen to go back to her family, saying that she could now go back freely. Colleen agreed to return, and she left, taking the bus. Finally, she was able to return to her family after spending 7 years with Cameron and Janice, away from her loved ones. When she got back, her family hugged her tightly, and the police arrested Cameron, sentencing him to 104 years in prison for kidnapping and murder. And that's the end of today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, if you liked the video, please give us a like and subscribe.